People always say every neighborhood has its own character. Some feel inviting the moment you arrive. Others keep you at arm's length. And then there are the ones that greet you with a grin while quietly sharpening the knife behind their back. I discovered that truth the morning I opened my door to find a police officer standing on my porch, squinting down at a piece of paper like it required translation. "Mr. Thompson?" he asked, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I'm responding to a complaint about HOA landscaping violations and an unauthorized exterior paint color." I leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand, deliberately taking a slow sip before answering. "That's cute," I said, loud enough for half the block to hear. "I'm not part of the HOA." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement across the street. There she was, Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed empress of Willowbrook. She stood in her perfectly trimmed yard, arms stiff at her sides, glaring daggers in my direction. Even from 50 feet away, her jaw looked tight enough to crush stone. The officer frowned, glancing from me to his paperwork and back again. "Sir, are you certain? The complaint lists 427 Oak Ridge Drive as belonging to the Willowbrook HOA." I remembered that smug posture of hers from the day I moved in. It feels like ages ago now. "I'm Dan Thompson, a software developer who works remotely. After years of enduring paper-thin apartment walls so thin, I'd practically hear my neighbor breathe, I finally saved enough to buy a house. The place I chose was a cozy 2-story with a spacious backyard, ideal for the vegetable garden I've been picturing since college. At first glance, the neighborhood seemed perfect. Peaceful streets, tidy homes, friendly waves from people out walking their dogs. But the real selling point wasn't something flashy in a listing photo. My property sat just outside the official boundary of the Willowbrook HOA. I confirmed it with my realtor, checked property maps twice, and read through HOA boundary documents until my eyes felt crossed. I chose that house on purpose. I value my independence. I wasn't about to pay a monthly fee so someone else could regulate my porch light bulbs. Before closing, the previous owners gave me a careful warning. "Watch out for Karen Mitchell," they said. "She's particular." I should have taken that more seriously. I met her on moving day. While I was hauling boxes from the truck, she swooped in like a hawk, carrying a clipboard, a tight smile fixed on her face. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she sang in a voice so sugary it could rot enamel. "I'm Karen Mitchell, HOA president. I'll need you to complete these membership forms and review our community guidelines." I wiped dust off my hands and looked her straight in the eye. "Thanks for the welcome, but this property isn't part of the HOA." For just a split second, her smile flickered like a faulty bulb. "Oh, well, I'm sure you'd still want to join voluntarily. We pride ourselves on maintaining very high standards." "I appreciate it," I replied calmly, "but I'll pass." The air seemed to cool instantly. Karen's eyes narrowed beneath her over-plucked brows as her fingers tightened around that clipboard. "I see," she said, her voice losing all sweetness. "Well, I do hope you'll maintain your property according to our standards anyway. We certainly wouldn't want property values dropping." Without waiting for a response, she spun on her heel and marched back across the street. I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. The first month went by peacefully enough. I set up my home office, unpacked everything, and built the raised garden beds I'd always wanted. Nothing wild, just tidy boxes lining my driveway, planted with tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and a row of bright sunflowers for color. My next-door neighbors, a retired couple, loved it. They even asked for tips on growing basil. But across the street, Karen watched with the intensity of a prison guard monitoring contraband. 2 days after I finished planting, the first letter showed up. Official Willowbrook HOA letterhead, signed in bold, looping script, Karen Mitchell. It claimed I was violating landscaping regulations, specifically Section 3.2 regarding approved plant species and placement. I had 7 days to remove my garden or face a 50 per day fine. I actually laughed out loud. I wasn't in the HOA, and she knew that. I tucked the letter away, convinced she'd realize how pointless this was. She didn't. More letters followed, each one more absurd than the last. By the third notice, she claimed, I owed $350 in accumulated fines. Then came threats of legal action. Every new envelope listed some fresh violation. My garden hose color wasn't approved. My trash cans were visible for 8 minutes on pickup day. Apparently, even my welcome mat was excessively non-neutral. I still believed she'd eventually run out of steam. I couldn't have been more wrong. Her next move came after I repainted my shutters. The original color was a dull beige. I replaced it with a deep forest green that looked fantastic against the cream siding. It took the better part of a weekend, and my neighbor Tom helped with the upper windows. When we stepped back to admire it, Tom nodded in approval. Looks sharp, he said with a grin. Karen reacted instantly. While I was out picking up bags of mulch, my security cameras recorded her planting in my driveway, taking pictures, and pressing paint samples against my siding like she was hosting some renovation show no one had asked for. The notice that arrived afterward read like a bureaucratic hallucination. According to her, my shutters violated the approved color palette, which conveniently consisted of exactly 2 options, sand dune beige and misty gray. By then, Karen had graduated from passive-aggressive letters. She escalated. Soon after, she contacted code enforcement. A tired-looking inspector showed up early one Tuesday. We received a complaint about unpermitted alterations, he said with a sigh that suggested this wasn't his first rodeo. I handed him the permits for my garden beds, and once again, explained that my house wasn't part of the HOA. He flipped through the paperwork, jotted down a few notes, and shook his head. Sorry about this. We get these kinds of calls sometimes. Next came a city inspector regarding my solar panels and installation added to reduce energy bills. Every permit was in order. The inspector even smiled as he looked things over. Nice setup, he said. Wish more folks around here would make the switch. Across the street, Karen simmered behind her curtains, but she still wasn't finished. Her grand finale, what she probably considered her masterstroke, was calling the police to report illegal structures and, incredibly, suspected drug activity in my backyard. Officer Martinez arrived looking more embarrassed than authoritative. We got a report about an unauthorized shed and suspicious behavior, he said carefully. I nearly choked on my coffee. It's a tool shed. He gave me an apologetic shrug. Mind if I take a look? I led him to it. Inside, he found a rake, bags of potting soil, and the most dangerous item of all, a slightly rusty lawnmower. He laughed. Yeah, this isn't exactly Breaking Bad. That was the moment something in me shifted. I started keeping records. Every letter, every visit, every exchange. I added more security cameras, kept a detailed logbook, and submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to the city and local police department. What came back stunned me. Karen had been filing falsified paperwork with city offices, asserting that my property fell within HOA boundaries. She had even fabricated meeting minutes from a board session that never occurred, minutes claiming my house had been formally voted into the association. This wasn't petty harassment anymore. It was fraud. I called my friend Sarah, an attorney, and laid everything out. As she flipped through the documents, her disbelief grew. Dan, she said finally, this goes beyond annoyance. This is actionable. Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter detailing every false claim, every forged document, and the clear legal status of my property outside HOA jurisdiction. It warned that any further harassment would trigger immediate legal proceedings. I sent it via certified mail. My security footage captured her reaction when she opened the envelope on her porch. The color drained from her face, then rushed back in an angry flush. She crushed the letter in her fist and stormed inside. For 3 full days, nothing happened. I almost let myself relax. Then Karen made her final and fatal error. She convened an emergency HOA board meeting in an attempt to push for expanded enforcement powers. But by then, several board members were exhausted by her obsession. Tom, who served on the board, later filled me in. She tried to say you were ruining the neighborhood, he told me. When we asked for evidence, all she had were pictures of your garden and green shutters. When the board demanded official documentation proving my house was inside HOA limits, Karen insisted she'd filed it with the management company. They called immediately. No such record existed. One board member, Janet, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney, looked at Karen and asked directly whether she'd acted without authorization. That's when I stepped in. Sarah's suggestion. I attended the meeting as a guest, something permitted under HOA bylaws. I walked in with the folder under my arm and requested 5 minutes to speak. Karen's face turned scarlet. He has no right to be here. He's not a member, she snapped. Janet calmly reminded her that guests were allowed. I laid out stamped county property maps, copies of the cease and desist letter, and documentation of every false report filed against me. I'm prepared to pursue harassment charges, I concluded, but I'd prefer to resolve this amicably. The room went quiet. Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I was protecting our standards, she finally muttered. The board wasn't convinced. They called for a vote of no confidence right then and there. Karen lost 6-1. The lone vote in her favor was her own. Meanwhile, the city had wrapped up its investigation. Karen received an official warning for filing false complaints and misusing public resources, along with substantial fines and the threat of charges if it happened again. But the real fallout came through word of mouth. In local real estate circles, news travels fast. Karen's employer, a managing partner at a local firm, summoned her after several clients threatened to pull their listings once they heard about her behavior. I wasn't present for that conversation, but Tom described it as brutal. The following morning, I added something new to my yard: a laminated property boundary map mounted beside my mailbox, accompanied by a friendly little sign that read, "Not your HOA, not your problem." It caught on quickly. Other homeowners outside the HOA limits started putting up similar signs. One neighbor designed his like a historic landmark plaque, established 1952, still independent. Another expanded his front yard vegetable patch and posted a sign that read, "HOA free tomatoes, help yourself." Within a month, 3 board members stepped down. Janet became the new president and publicly clarified HOA boundaries. She even complimented my shutters. Karen managed to keep her job barely, but her influence vanished. The police flagged her for nuisance reporting. The HOA barred her from holding leadership roles. And a neighbor she'd targeted before me filed a lawsuit for emotional distress. The last I heard, she paid $15,000 in damages and legal fees. She still lives across the street. Now though, she keeps to herself. Every so often, notice her glancing at my tomato plants, but she doesn't say a word. And that's how a clipboard-wielding tyrant finally ran into someone who wouldn't bend. If you enjoyed watching this petty HOA power spectacular play collapse, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people discover stories like this. And if you appreciate seeing entitled behavior meet real consequences, make sure to subscribe for more true tales of neighborhood drama, justice served, and satisfying payback. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's next.